excited to bring you evidence-based nutrition information focusing on addressing the root cause for imbalance. Food has the power to help you achieve lifelong optimal health without the side effects of prescription medication. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast platform. I am Stacy Seslowski, functional nutrition registered dietitian.
And I am Leah Grace Barrick, functional nutritionist.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Power of Food podcast. We are super excited to be here with our guest today, Sage Dammers. Sage is the co-founder and CEO of Addictive Wellness, which specializes in guilt-free raw chocolates with premium superfoods and herbs, free from sugar, dairy, gluten, soy, GMOs, and nuts, each providing unique health benefits. From his teenage years, he delved into exploring ancient herbal systems and nutritional practices, particularly focusing on Taoist Tonic Herbalism. As a master chocolatier and product formulator, Sage has devoted his life to this pursuit. With unyielding passion, Sage consistently seeks out the purest and most potent superfoods and adaptogenic herbs from across the globe. Welcome to the Power of Food podcast, Sage. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you both for having me on. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Amazing. Well, I would love to start by learning a bit about your background and how you got into this incredibly interesting world of adaptogens and chocolate and business and all of that.
Sure. So for me to go back a little ways, it started when I was growing up. I grew up in a pretty healthy family. My parents were trying to feed us all organic foods. With the knowledge they had at the time, they thought the best healthy diet was a vegetarian diet. I could travel back in time and might tweak a thing or two, but it was, it was like the late 80s, early 90s. There wasn't really the internet of all this with all this information that we have available now. So they were doing the best they could and with the best of intentions with the knowledge that they had at the time. But what that looked like for me nutritionally was like white rice and tofu 5 nights a week, and then maybe a night of pizza and a night of pasta. And that was kind of then on repeat. So I didn't necessarily have the greatest nutritional density or the greatest variety of different things in my diet. And I always did pretty well in school, did pretty well in sports, but there was always this upper echelon of performers in both of those that I could never quite seem to break into. And I didn't know what I was missing. I always felt like I must be missing some sort of an input to get that level of output that I'm seeing these other people have. And the one thing I knew for sure that was different about me was that I was eating a vegetarian diet. I didn't know anybody else doing that. And so that's one thing that I thought, could it be that? I didn't want it to be that because I was, raised with the sort of the philosophy of vegetarianism and not wanting to harm, which is honorable, but maybe a little not optimal at all times for all people. But that aside, it can be done in somewhat of a healthy way. But for me, I was not getting the optimal nutritional density, I feel. But at the time, I didn't know what to do. But my parents had a wellness center, and I was growing up around this, and they had infrared saunas way before it became this popular thing that it is today. They had infrared heated jade massage beds. They sold some supplements and superfood products and had a naturopath working there consulting with people. And of course, I was growing up learning about a lot of things here that your average 14, 15-year-old is not hearing about and already getting exposed to this Eastern concept of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That if you get ahead of it and build a foundation of health, rather than waiting to get sick and then having to take a Western medical emergency room approach to dealing with it, you're going to be a lot better off in the long run. And I was getting pretty inspired because I would see these older folks, maybe in 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, come in with all sorts of issues, whether it was chronic back pain or liver issues or blood pressure issues. People came in with all sorts of issues, and I was seeing them get better from these alternative health practices that they were taking on. But at the same time, I realized they're still not doing the prevention approach. They're still doing the wait till it gets bad and treat it. Now, they are treating it with a much more holistic and well-rounded approach. It's not going to have all sorts of negative side effects, but they are still waiting until things go wrong and then trying to address it. So I thought, okay, they're doing that. What if I go really to the spirit of what this idea is? And I, at the age of 14, start doing everything I can right now for health optimization and anti-aging. What is that going to look like? What is that going to mean, not just for the number of years I get to stay alive for, but for the overall quality of my life experience. For me, my passion was surfing, still is surfing. And so I was thinking, okay, most people peak in their surfing abilities, maybe late 20s, early 30s, and it's kind of downhill from there. And then between 50 and 60, you kind of stop seeing them out in the water because they've got this injury or that injury, back problems, whatever it may be. And I thought, okay, well, what if I can extend that period of improvement and peak in my abilities when I'm 50 and then stay in the water until I'm, who knows, 80, whatever it may be. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do everything that I can. And that what happened is this gentleman came in from the local community who was selling this protein product that he wanted my parents to consider carrying at the wellness center. It was like hemp protein with some spirulina and chlorella, some other like Western herbs like milk thistle. And this guy was the first example of what I had in mind that I wanted to do in terms of his health and his life path, in the sense that he was 42. He looked like he could be in his mid 20s. He was incredibly smart, totally ripped. And I thought, wow, whatever this guy's doing, I need to find out more about, because that's what I want for my life. And he said he was having this protein mix as 2 of his 3 meals of the day. I said, okay, I'm going to try this. Now, I didn't know what I was doing with it. I was just kind of blending it up with some frozen bananas and frozen berries and some Tropicana orange juice and just seeing what would happen. And it tasted so bad. It was so rough, but I didn't care. I was dedicated to get the results. And so I would take a straw and stick the straw all the way to the back of my throat and just slurp this thing down so I wouldn't have to taste it. But I noticed that after having it for a couple of days, I would get this incredible high afterwards, this incredible clarity. Now, maybe a little bit of that was the sugar rush of having all these fruits basically like IV dripped into the back of my throat. But also some of it was getting nutrition that I had never had before. And I had never had this level of nutritional density, and I was feeling amazing. It was a clear high and a level of performance capability that I had never seen to that point. And this got me thinking, if this has been out there all this time and I've been missing out on it, what else have I been missing out on? So this kind of shot me off down this rabbit hole of wanting to first learn more about all the ingredients that were in there, and then looking more into additional superfoods and herbal ingredients. And the more I would learn, the more I would incorporate into my life. The more I would incorporate, the more I would get better feeling in my health and perform better in physical fitness and also in school. The better I would do there, the more inspired I would be to learn more. And it just started this cycle that never really stopped until today. And as I went through this, naturally, as you go through the hero's journey in life and you slay your own personal dragon, as I felt I had there, and you come back to your community, you want to share the riches, the spoils with your community, in the sense that I think you can only go down a healthy path for so long before you want to share it with others and help other people achieve what you've discovered. Problem was, I was in college. My friends were interested in having Oxycontin, Percocets, all forms of alcohol, marijuana. That was their only dietary interest, and some fast food. So I was like, okay, how am I going to share this and not become totally ostracized by my community of friends? And so I initially didn't. I kept it to myself. People knew I was a little bit different because I would come to the party with my own personal chocolate herbal elixir while everybody else was having alcohol. And I was on a whole different trip, having just as much fun as anybody, but slightly differently. And I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to be the one pushing this on others when they were obviously having their own kind of fun. But then I went on a surf trip with some friends. We were in Costa Rica, and I would go out and surf for 4, 5, 6 hours, and they would be coming back into the beach after 2 hours, wanting to rest and have food and just need to chill out. And they saw that I had brought with me my little old magic bullet blender, and I would be in the corner of our little hotel room blending up these weird drinks with whatever local fruit I could get my hands on and my superfood selection of different powders. And eventually they said, hey, could you maybe make me one of those before we go back out to surf? And this is the moment I had been waiting for. And I was like, yes, I can do that. I thought, this is my chance. Now, it didn't go so well because these guys were so toxic from the lifestyle they had been living that sometimes when you're very toxic and you consume something with a lot of powerfully detoxifying ingredients in it, those toxins are mobilized and your body says, let's get these out of here as fast as possible. And sometimes that's back out through the way they originally came in. So 3 out of the 4 guys were in the bathroom vomiting within a matter of minutes. And I had to pause and reflect because I thought, okay, this is not going to work. If I'm going to really have any beneficial impact beyond just myself here in the long run, I am going to have to figure out a way to make healthy food, healthy drinks, etc., so enjoyable, so pleasurable that people are going to consume it because it tastes so amazing, because it's such an amazing food experience, and just so happens to be massively healthy as an afterthought. And I didn't know exactly how that vision would come to be at the time, but I knew I had to win on flavor because I wanted to be able to hand something to people, knowing that it's not just long-term benefits that they're going to get, but they're about to have a fun experience and enjoy it. And so that eventually led me down the path of chocolate, because I saw all these superfoods. They're all a little bit weird tasting. They have these bitter flavors, they have these sour flavors. People don't know what to do with them. But I saw on the shelf at the wellness center, I saw cacao powder. And I asked my mom, like, what is this doing here? I know we had like Hershey's hot chocolate as a kid, but I was under no misconceptions about it being healthy with all those floating marshmallows in there that rehydrate themselves. And she says, no, well, actually, chocolate in its pure form is one of the elite superfoods. And I started to learn that it's the highest natural source of antioxidants, the highest natural food source of magnesium, great for chromium, which is fantastic for blood sugar balance, and all kinds of other neurotransmitter type chemicals like serotonin and the bliss chemical anandamide, or PEA, the love bliss chemical. So I started thinking 2 things. One, this could be the gateway superfood because it's something that people think of as a guilty pleasure, but can also, if done right, be massively healthy. And as I hear about these bliss chemicals, all I think is, what if this could help people get kind of a natural high, so to speak, and not need to turn to some of the things with such deleterious long-term effects? And so that was kind of the spark that got me experimenting with chocolate, and what later became a company where I get to be Willy Wonka every day.
I absolutely loved listening to that story. It's really,
Thank you.
really cool from the beginning to end. Your family was well beyond, ahead of their time, I think. I mean, most families in the 80s and 90s were busy eating convenience processed foods and fast food. So that's amazing. But I think a point that you made, which is really important, and I think still is happening today, is that people are so worried about foods that are bad for you. So they're very much concerned with eliminating and subtracting, but they're not as concerned with adding, nutrient density. What foods do they have to add to their diet to make sure they're getting all the nutrients that they need? And I think we're very much lacking that nutrient density. So I think you were also very smart for a 14-year-old to be to stay aware of all these things and keep wanting to share it with other people. So cool. So what can you list, first of all, some of the herbs that you found throughout your journey that you think are just absolutely most essential for us and that maybe we aren't necessarily getting from our diet?
Sure, absolutely. I would say the first adaptogenic herb that I stumbled onto was astragalus. And maybe I'll just give like a 30-second background on what is an adaptogen for somebody who has not heard that term before. This is essentially an elite class of herbs with dual directional properties to them, meaning that it has not pre-decided when it comes into your body what's going to happen. It is very much reacting to the inner chemistry of your body and strengthening your body's own inherent self-regulatory mechanisms. So with many of these herbs, if you're too tired, they will help your energy production. They're not a stimulant, but they're just going to help you make more ATP. Whereas at the same herb, if you are overly stimulated in the evening, it's going to help you relax. It's not a sedative, but it just makes you feel more peaceful. Similarly, some of these herbs will, if your immune system is underactive, can help bring it up. If it's overactive, it can help bring it down. They can regulate metabolism. It's all about regulation and strengthening your body's resilience against all forms of external stressors. So when I was first getting into these, getting more energy was a big priority for me. I wanted to maximize my day-to-day life experience. And sometimes I was not respecting sleep, and I hadn't really, when I was 18, 19, learned about the deep benefits of optimized sleep. My thought was, how can I just make more energy during the day so I have to sleep less and can just live more? Not the best long-term strategy, not what I would recommend, but I did discover my first adaptogen in this process, and that was astragalus, which is an elite chi tonic, meaning it benefits your moment-to-moment energy, vitality, cognitive function, immune system function. It's not a stimulant like caffeine, which is basically having you dip into your savings account, your reserves of energy, and using that to pay for today at the expense of tomorrow. But it's helping your body's own natural mitochondrial energy production mechanisms. It's also a pretty powerful, I'd say one of the elite antiviral herbs in the world, and a great immune regulator. And it's a lung tonic. And it was traditionally very popular amongst people who were working outdoors and in the cold, because it would help their resilience against these challenging conditions. And especially it was said to provide more physical strength, especially in the extremities, so in the arms and the legs. So I was pretty excited about that. And I started off I didn't know what to do with it. So I did the craziest thing, which is just taking spoonfuls in my mouth of the dry powder. And I would do a couple of these a day, but I was just buzzing and feeling just incredible energy from it. And you could maybe at the point of, several tablespoons overstimulate yourself. But otherwise, as long as you keep it within a reasonable range, and for most people, like half a teaspoon to a teaspoon is a more reasonable range, you get a really nice sustained energy from it. And so that was one of my early favorites. And then another one of my top favorites is reishi mushroom. And this is an herb that works on many levels. First, on the immune system. It's one of the great immune regulatory herbs, well known for being chemotherapy compatible and having benefits in situations where people are dealing with cancer, and very supportive of whatever route people are taking. If they're trying to go all natural, okay, it could be a great tool there. If they're trying to do chemotherapy plus natural things that are going to be compatible, it can be nice there. Of course, I'm not an oncologist. I just share information that I'm passionate about. So of course, consult with your medical provider before you do anything wild. But reishi also is then going on to help your energy production. It's a chi tonic in a similar way to astragalus, and helps your oxygen utilization. But what reishi is most well known for is its spiritual properties. So it was traditionally known as the herb of immortality and spiritual potency, and was probably the most sought after substance by Taoist monks and hermits for thousands of years. And it was said to really quiet the mind and open up the heart. A very popular herb amongst meditators and spiritual seekers. And it just has such a beautiful effect on evolving your inner self. It sounds a bit esoteric, a bit strange perhaps to some, but there's quite a popular saying that if you don't consider reishi to be a psychedelic psychoactive mushroom, you just haven't been taking it long enough. It's very subtle in the way that it works, but it can really shift someone's approach to life over time. And I think a lot of that happens just by down-regulating the stress, helping the balance of the HPA axis. And when you're not constantly in that fight or flight, you can really start to step back and take a whole new outlook on life, and take a new and different and healthier, sane approach to things, which in these days where we're just bombarded by so much stress is almost rare to not make a decision out of a place of stress and worry and concern. Because the more we go through time and the more we get all these great technological innovations that promise us an easier life, I don't know anybody who says they're less stressed than they were 10 years ago. So while these external stressors just keep growing, it's important to have tools in your tool belt like reishi mushroom that can help build your stress resilience from the inside out.
Amazing.
So those are two of my favorites. There's many, there's dozens, but those are two of my top ones for sure.
So interesting. Yeah, I knew about reishi with the immune effects, but I've never heard about the more spiritual effects. That's super interesting to hear. And I love what you were saying about the adaptogens too, kind of like allowing them to do the work. Like that, like I feel like a lot of times in health, we take these things or do these things almost like wanting to force our bodies into something using an external factor. And it's almost like more of allowing the adaptogen to kind of do what it needs to do and allowing your body to kind of come back to that homeostasis, which I think is one of the really beautiful things about adaptogens. And yeah, the resilience, like I talk to my clients about that all the time. Like the goal is really to increase your resilience because like you said, there's so much stress out there. I feel like it's almost becoming essential that we're all taking adaptogens just to deal with today's day and age and all of that in society. So it's really exciting that we're seeing more and more of these come out and even more research on them come out because it's obviously they've been used for, I don't know how many years, many years, but it's so fascinating. And I'm curious in terms of taking adaptogens, Is there a specific form that's best? And also, I think a lot of people have the mindset of Western medicine when they start taking a supplement, an herb or something, where it's like they're going to take it and that day they're going to feel the effects. And if they don't, then it's not working. Whereas I know with adaptogens, it's more, you kind of have to take it for a while. So is there a specific amount of time that you typically recommend people take it for to start to feel the effects? And is there a specific form that is best for that?
In terms of the form, it really starts with how it's grown. So there's a philosophy, an old philosophy from the Taoist system called Di-Dao, which says that, yeah, you can take an herb like astragalus and grow it in many different places. Or say, for example, an herb like rhodiola, you can grow it in many different places. You could grow it in America. You could grow it in Africa. You could grow it in Europe, probably. You could grow it definitely in Asia because that's where it's originally evolved. And that is where you want it from. You want to get an herb or a plant grown in the land, in the environment that it evolved in, because that is where it has evolved to grow the strongest. It has evolved to thrive in this soil microbiome. It has evolved to grow the best in these climatic conditions. And so getting it from the place where it's traditionally from is always considered to be ideal. Then the next thing to think about is how it's extracted. So with many of these herbs, if you just take the herb and chew it up on its own, you might get either a little bit of nutritional value from it or not much at all. For example, in the case of some of these tree mushrooms like chaga mushroom or reishi mushroom or turkey tail mushroom, they have a cell wall made from chitin, which is a substance so hard that it's absolutely indigestible. So you could eat this in the same sense that you could eat the wood of a tree, but you're not going to get the nutrition out of it. So these need to be extracted, and there's multiple ways this can be done. The two most common are hot water extraction, where it's the herb is effectively chopped up and simmered for an extended period of time. And here you get out the active compounds, which are water soluble. The main ones that we're looking for here are the beta-glucan polysaccharides, these very long chain sugars that have great benefits for the immune system. And then the other method of extraction is alcohol extraction, where the herb is chopped up then and put in alcohol to extract, typically for a period of 6 months or longer. And this is where you get out the alcohol soluble compounds. Primarily here, we're looking at the terpenes. And this is a different class that delivers a lot of the other adaptogenic properties of some of these herbs. Now, some herbs only really require hot water extraction because what they're delivering is primarily water-soluble compounds, whereas some others, like a lot of the mushrooms, reishi is a great example of this, is one where you want both. So with our reishi mushroom, for example, it's hot water extracted, it's alcohol extracted, and then it is sprayed. Those extracts are liquid and they're sprayed right into a powder. But actually, let me take one step back. I also want to emphasize that the reishi is grown on wood, and that this is a part of the Di-Dao growing principle, is that these mushrooms, in many companies and the way they're grown today, they're grown on a base of grain. But traditionally, these are found growing on fallen trees in the wild. And the problem is that if you take something off of its traditional growth medium and put it onto something totally different, it's going to produce different compounds. If I took you as a human off of your traditional ancestral diet and put you on a diet of only grains, you're not going to be the fullest manifestation of yourself either. So people often go into a health food store and see products that are mushrooms that say certified organic, US grown, and they think, okay, that's exactly the positive things I'm looking for. This is the one. The problem is it's been grown on grain. And as a result, it doesn't produce terpenes, which is one of the main classes of beneficial compounds we're looking for. So not only do they not get that, but a lot of times when these are grown on grain, they're not grown properly. And there's been tests and studies done where they looked at the final products, and what's actually being sold in the final product is almost entirely grain material with little to no mushroom at all. So it makes me a little bit sad when people say, okay, I heard about reishi mushroom. I'm going to the health food store. I'm going to try the best looking organic reishi mushroom product I can find. And then they go on to consume brown rice powder, and they have no experience with it. And they say, oh, that guy on that podcast, I don't know what he's talking about. Reishi mushrooms in general, adaptogens, forget it. Like, that doesn't do anything. He's full of it. And so with ours, it's grown on wood, because then you have all these correct compounds being made. Then we do alcohol extraction, hot water extraction. And then we even go a step further, and with reishi in particular, and collect the spores, basically like the seeds that reishi shoots off. And these contain even higher concentrations of these beneficial compounds. And so we combine the hot water extract, the alcohol extract, and the spores. So you're really getting everything that reishi has to offer. And so the key is the extraction in many cases, because there are even still some companies that will sell, say, ashwagandha powder or astragalus powder or reishi powder. Many of these just the raw herb powdered down into what in the industry is called a crude powder. And you're not getting nearly as much out of it, maybe even nothing out of it in this format compared to had it been properly extracted. And then to go to the question of formats, there's different formats. There's liquid tinctures that you can try. What we do is usually in powder. The reason we've chosen to go that way is you get the most bang for your buck, because if you're buying tinctures, they can be great. It's a very traditional way of doing it. The problem is that you're having to pay effectively for the transport of all this heavy liquid and glass around the world, around the country, wherever it's going. And that is reflected, multiplied over in the cost of the final product. So you don't actually end up getting as much for your money. Whereas if it's been spray dried into a powder before being shipped anywhere, then it's much more concentrated. And so you're able to get better value in the end. And it's easy to mix with water and make yourself a really nice tea. Like, it's something I love about astragalus. It's got a very nice vanilla graham cracker flavor to it. So it's very easy for a beginner to try and enjoy. Somebody who maybe doesn't have a healthy palate at all can still enjoy it. And then to the part of the question about how long to take these, some people do take it just once and they expect an instantaneous reaction and decide after one dose whether it's worked or not. For some people, you do have an experience after one time. You do experience a bit of a shift, a bit more energy. Your eyes maybe open up. You feel a little bit maybe more relaxed, depending on what's going on with you and which herb you're using. But I always encourage people to wait and see and take an herb for at least a period of 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer, because that's the period that we usually see them being consumed in studies, looking at the benefits of these herbs. So I say give it at least a month and then decide, has this shown any promise for me or not? And in terms of how long you can take it, these are things that are really intended to be taken in small amounts daily over the course of your life to build this solid foundation of health, so that when these earthquakes of stress come or when the winds of stress blow, you're not going to fall right over.
I think that what you're sharing, the information you're sharing, is so important, because you're right. The quality, like the sourcing and how it's all taken care of, grown and extracted, I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I think you're right. Even not just, consumers that are going to stores and picking products from the shelves, but even healthcare professionals that are recommending supplements that are coming from reputable, like, supplement companies, still are not looking into, the sourcing and the way it's all extracted. So I think that is so important. I really have a lot of questions about how you put this all into chocolate. But before I get there, can you let me know, are there any contraindications? Are there any people who are going to have a negative response or who should not be taking these things?
It's entirely possible. And if somebody has any particular disease or health condition or are taking any medications, it's always good to consult with your functional medicine doctor, who will have familiarity with your medications, with your state of health, and probably also have some expertise and knowledge and ability to assess these adaptogens and how they might interact. There are certainly contraindications for some people. For example, if you're taking blood thinners, for example, let's say somebody's taking like a Coumadin or Warfarin, in a situation like that, if you were to consume an herb like reishi mushroom or ashwagandha, these things could have further blood thinning properties and put you in a risky position. So you would have to work with your doctor and say, okay, if I want to take this herb, then how do I have to adjust the dose of this other thing? Maybe do you have to examine my blood a little bit to have a look, or maybe is it just not worth the risk? And that's a decision that person has to make one-on-one with their medical provider. So for all of these, there are different contraindications, quite rare. They are powerful and beneficial for the vast majority of people. But one thing I've learned being in both the food and the herbal business is that both from a flavor perspective and a health perspective, there's no food, no herb in the world that's going to be perfect. Always check with your doctor to make sure that this is going to take you to a better place and not complicate things.
Perfect. Well, like Stacey said, I'm sure our listeners and Stacey and I are wondering how you are combining chocolate and all of the adaptogens in your products. And before that, you just touch on the difference between cacao and cocoa, because a lot of my nutrition clients come to me thinking they're the same thing and they're very different. So I would love for you to just kind of clear the air in terms of like health benefits and how those are different and how you're kind of combining herbs with chocolate.
Sure. So to go back on the naming, the original name got kind of simplified by the Spanish conquistadors into cacao. And then the word cacao came back to Europe and made its way to the UK, where with the British, with their accent and their dialect, had a hard time with the word cacao, and they turned it into cocoa. So a part of it is just semantics. However, what it's typically separated out into these days is that cacao refers to a much less processed, more original version of the plant, whereas cocoa is something that's been definitely roasted, so it's heat processed, and often goes through, it's also alkalized, which is the process that is more chemically involved to make it less bitter. Unfortunately, that also destroys a lot of the beneficial compounds that are in there. So when you go with like a very mainstream chocolate, this is cocoa. It's been quite heavily processed to make it as sensorily pleasing and as uniform across the food supply to the broadest group of people with westernized taste buds. When you go to cacao, this has been absolutely minimally processed and designed to really present this amazing plant to you so you can experience what nature intended it to be all about. And so with chocolate, I got really into the benefits of cacao and having this be the gateway health food for people. And at the same time, I was getting really into these traditional herbal systems of indigenous cultures. And the impediment that I saw with a lot of folks is that a lot of these herbs have quite bitter flavors to them. And our Western palate these days, for the most part, is not so used to bitter flavors because the bitter compounds, which are typically the medicinal compounds, have been bred out of our food supply. That's why we have salads that are made out of romaine lettuce and not dandelion greens. And then, the conspiracy theory is they breed the medicine out of your food supply and then sell it back to you as pharmaceuticals. But we won't go down too much that rabbit hole. But the thing I was realizing is, okay, these are bitter flavors that people are not used to. Astragalus tastes delicious. Gynostema, another great adaptogenic leaf, tastes delicious. They're not all like that. The reishi mushroom, quite bitter. Hoshu wu, a great adrenal tonic, quite bitter. And I was thinking, okay, how am I going to get people to consume these things? People in the Western world seem to be totally okay with chocolate. And so I realized, okay, if you can put these into chocolate, you can camouflage those other bitter flavors and kind of Trojan horse sneak them into people, so to speak. And they're none the wiser as far as the taste goes. It covers up the flavor so nicely and actually adds some interesting depth of flavor to it without throwing people off. And people loved it. And I got kind of into just on the side of the other work I was doing, I was making people custom batches of chocolate. So people would come to me and I would make an entire batch with a custom herbal formulation for them. And that was a ton of fun. But at a certain point, you start getting, more and more interest. And I thought, okay, this is something that I may need to actually formalize and turn into a legitimate business. And the other idea with putting these in chocolate, beyond just the flavor side of things, is that with cacao, it has two interesting benefits and ways of magnifying the benefits of the herbs, in that it is a vasodilator. So it's helping the absorption of the herbs as they're coming into your body. And it's also a bit of an MAO inhibitor. MAO, for those not familiar, is monoamine oxidase. This is a substance that is like the bouncer in your body, in the nightclub of your intestinal tract. It says, okay, you guys, we're closing down. It's time to go. Everybody get out. The MAO inhibitor is something that is like, that says, no, these guys, this see reishi mushroom over here, see hoshu wu, see ashwagandha, they are cool. They're my friends. They're helping to clean up after we close down. It's all right. You can let them stay. They're cool. So this allows letting them hang around longer. So it really creates kind of the ultimate delivery vehicle for adaptogenic herbs. And so it makes it fun, and it magnifies the benefits.
Amazing. Well, I'm sold. You did a great job. I totally want to try your
Oh,
chocolate.
thank you.
And so thank you so much for this information. I think it's really enlightening, and you had such a positive. Before we close up, can you maybe share 2 or 3, I don't know, like first steps that you would recommend to our audience members if they were going to start to kind of like put their toes into like using herbs and things and adaptogens and things like that?
Of course. So we mentioned quite a few different adaptogens today, and there are quite a few others. So it can be easy to get overwhelmed initially and say, oh, there's so many of these. I have to incorporate 20, 30 adaptogens every single day. They all sound so great. What do I choose? Start with one. Let's say I would say peruse a few, right? Read about a couple and see which one inspires you the most, and just pick one. Maybe you want to really optimize your cognitive health. So it's lion's mane mushroom. Maybe you go for astragalus because you want energy with a side of immunity, or maybe you're an endurance athlete and you want to go for cordyceps mushroom. That is great for improving oxygen utilization and building energy and endurance. Or maybe you really need to work on your HPA axis regulation, and so you go for something like ashwagandha. Or maybe you're pursuing a spiritual path and want less stress, so it's reishi mushroom. Whatever it is, you pick one. Start with that. Take half a teaspoon of the extract powder. In the case of most of these, for some like ashwagandha, they're more concentrated, so it's a lower dose, maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon. Mix it into a couple ounces of warm water. Sit somewhere quiet, sit somewhere still on your own, and just sip it like that. And I love people experiencing herbs like this for the first time, because eventually you're going to get into having it in wild smoothies and different herbal creations, in chocolates, all this stuff. But getting to know an herb is like dating a new partner. On a first date, you don't want to go to a rave. You're not going to get to know the other person. It's going to be too much sensory input. You want to go to somewhere quiet where you can get to know them one-on-one. Later, you can go together to all the wild parties. But initially, sit down, be still, pay attention to your breath, pay attention to how it's making you feel, and get to know it one-on-one like that before you get too wild. And so that just start simple, and then you can expand. Maybe you do one herb for a month, and then you say, okay, this is going to be an easy part of my regular program. I have a way that I like taking it. Maybe I put it in my coffee, in my smoothie. Maybe I just put it in hot water. And then from there, maybe you'd like to add something else and take it a step further. Or maybe you're just happy with one, and that's great too. And that will be a great, powerful tool for building your health for the rest of your life.
Amazing. I love that so much. That is the perfect analogy, because
Thank you.
it is. And you're not going to be able to feel the full effect if you're distracted by 10 other adaptogens or different foods that you're having it with. So that's a really, really beautiful idea. And yeah, starting small like that is great. Just pick one. And I love the idea of, researching like 3 or 4, and maybe just like kind of tuning in to your intuition and feeling which one is kind of like calling to you to start there. So that's a really, really great advice. Thank you so much, Sage. This has been so amazing. Can you tell our listeners how they can find you, how they can get chocolate, and how they can connect with you?
My pleasure. Yeah. So if you want to check out some of our products and things that we create with so much love and passion, as you can probably hear from my voice, you can check out our website, addictivewellness.com. And then if you just want to learn more, if you're a little bit inspired by this and want to take a deeper dive, we have a YouTube channel with hours and hours and hours and hours of fun educational content about all these herbs, but also beyond that, various health topics, supplements, food, everything. So, and chocolate, of course. So you can check us out on YouTube. The channel is just called Addictive Wellness, and we'd love to see you over there as well. And leave us a comment on YouTube if you came from this podcast. It's always fun to see.
And I think that you said you would allow our audience members to have a discount, right? Did you say that?
Of course. Yes, absolutely. So why don't we say, let's do a discount code, Power of Food, and
Okay.
that will get you 10% off if you want to give some things a try. And I hope you will love everything as much as I do.
Okay, and we'll put that in our notes so that everybody could see. Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much, Sage, for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode helpful, we'd love if you left a rating and review and shared it with someone else who would find it helpful. You can find more information about Leah at gracefunctionalnutrition.com and get in touch with her through email at leah@gracefunctionalnutrition.com or on Instagram at gracefunctionalnutrition. To find more information about Stacey, you can find her at healfromfood.com, email her at stacey@healfromfood, or on social media at healfromfood. See you next time.